Now, when you explain, when you teach a course in international public relations, then you say, well, what produced it? It's globalization. That's the big word that's used, globalization. So my chapter 2 deals with globalization. That's what created a need for PR. There's a little formula here that whenever business moves into a new area, PR tags along. Because after all, we're helping out. We're assisting management. And so management goes there, okay, you've got to do something internationally. So Friedman's book, The World is Flat, that's a good introduction to globalization. Now, when you think of globalization, what's the motivation for a corporation to go abroad? And typically, well, low wages. Low wages. Instead of paying $50 an hour, we can pay less than $5 an hour in China. And I still remember a segment on TV, the electric iron factory in Ohio. Those workers were only making $8 an hour, but they were all losing their jobs because the company, I think it was GE, they decided to have this produced in Mexico where they only had to pay $5 an hour. So certainly one of the major motivations was cheap labor. And of course you have to ask what product you're making, and if labor is a major component, if it's more, say it's a third or a half, then it pays a company to go abroad. Now, is that the only reason why you go abroad? Just cheap labor? You know, there are others. I pause a little bit so you might just tick it off in your mind. What else might there be? Now, there's such a word, and inversion deals. Let's see, do I have that in my notes here? Globalization, free market. Well, I'll use my list here. Inversion deals. Has everybody heard that term, inversion deal?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
In Ireland, that's what they're doing.
Ireland, yes.
And they're using Ireland as a place, but the students might not have heard of it.
Okay, you see what an inversion deal is? It's the American government that is hurting itself. The United States has one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world, 35%. Now, if I'm working for a company and I know that I have to pay 35% taxes on the profit that I make, I'll look around and say, is there any way I can cut that down? And so, as some pharmaceutical companies have done and others, they go to where? Ireland.
Right.
Now in Ireland, mind you, they will keep their offices, maybe in New York or wherever, but technically, legally, their operations are in Ireland.
Right.
Now, what's the tax rate in Ireland? I think the last time I looked, the rate was something like 12.5%. And then, incidentally, what these companies do, they will collect all the figures, all the profits in Ireland, but then they will transfer the profits to, guess where? Think of warm temperature. The Bahamas, right. Bermuda. Yep. And in some of those countries, no taxes have to be paid.
Right.
And so instead of paying 35%, you pay none.
Right.
Now, some companies, the other aspect here is also paying taxes on the profits that you make in the country. Starbucks got into trouble in England because they were making a lot of money in England. However, they weren't paying any taxes to England. Now they are, and this is why it's so important to distinguish between a producer company and a consumer company. They're dealing with consumers. Consumers got angry at Starbucks for not paying taxes. And so Starbucks indeed paid taxes. Not a high percent, not 35%, I think it was something like 12 or 15 maybe. But anyhow, that was the pressure on them. So when you look at that term, inversion deals, this past year, 2015, there were dozens of them. Now, I asked myself a question from a PR viewpoint, because I'm supposed to be very ethical. and we talk about CSR, corporate social responsibility, is that being socially responsible on the part of these drug companies that skip over to Ireland and other countries to avoid paying taxes? Is that ethical? I leave it to you. You know, I could say, well, when you're in business, you are obligated, at least this is one of the models, to maximize profits for your owners, for your investors. And so I would be remiss as a believer in the free market system if I didn't go along with this. And I could also say, okay, the US government, they're not doing anything to change it. So to hell with them. You know, let them suffer. We're going to take advantage of the tax regulations. And usually there's some statement that all these corporations say, we obey all the laws of the country and we pay all the taxes that we are obligated to pay. So in other words, they're taking the legal approach. So I wouldn't, I would theoretically say, yeah, look at it from a social corporate responsibility viewpoint. That's an angle to look at. But I would pretty soon knock that down and say, why should I play that game if the government is stupid enough to not change the tax laws on corporations? My obligation is to investors. Now, also in looking why is there globalization, of course there are new markets. Not just lower production, lower labor costs, but I want to sell abroad. In fact, I should have listed that first in my notes. That is listed first. You're looking around for new customers all over the world. So, okay, that's a major motivation. So those are the main reasons that go overseas. We have to think about globalization in terms such as, I think it's Starwood, a hotel company, they own Marriott. A Chinese conglomerate is trying to buy them out. Now, that's not taking advantage of low labor costs or taxes. It's simply saying, we want your operations. We want ownership in other countries. And that's the motive behind several purchases. Now, it goes the other way too. GE wanted to buy a French company, Alstom, because they're getting rid of consumer products. They want to be known as a big industrial conglomerate. And so they wanted to buy a French firm. And then here's where you get into a lot of PR and public affairs. Immelt, the CEO, he had a tough time convincing the French government to okay the sale of this nuclear company and other industrial products company. And the French government is playing a little game too. They invited Siemens, a German firm, to bid for the same company. Okay, now GE, you know, they have to up their offer price. And then the French government comes along and says, you know, we're very concerned about employment. You've got to guarantee employment. And so GE had to make all kinds of concessions. Now this is where you talk about diplomacy. And this is where you talk about, do you call it PR or do you call it public affairs? I call it public affairs. And also, there's a term that has been circulating a little bit, corporate diplomacy. Corporate diplomacy. I first came across this, I think, a book 10 years old. Now there's a book called Corporate Diplomacy and Public, well, no, corporate, no, that's not the one. No, I got the wrong title. No, there's another book called Corporate Diplomacy. I forget what the subtitle is. And as far as my interpretation of it is, it's pretty much saying what I call public affairs. The author of this book is calling corporate diplomacy. But it kind of elevates, it gives the activity greater stature because diplomacy has its stature. And so now, a corporate diplomacy. In fact, some years ago I was playing around with a title, Private Sector Diplomacy. And I actually went to a publisher and asked about it. They shot it down. They didn't like it. So anyhow, another example of titles. Okay, so globalization is the beginning then of what opens the door for international PR or international corporate communication. I've just looked at the incentives for going abroad and for others to come to us. There are also obstacles. And this is a mistake that PR people often make in their campaigns. They look at the positive side, the motivation for doing something. They don't look at the resistance. They don't look at the obstacles. And I have a list of obstacles here. One of them is weak infrastructures, roads, ports. When you think of India, when you think of Africa particularly, I see pictures of deliveries being made on bicycle, for drugs, for example, because the roads are so bad. So certainly infrastructure is a major concern. Then resurgent nationalism. France was guilty of that. Well, we don't want a major company, a French company, being sold to an American company. There's nationalism. Years ago, when, I forget the name of the organization, there's a Dubai company that's, that deals with harbors, with shipping, with ports. And New York was going to sell its port facilities to this Middle East firm. Well, Hillary Clinton was one of those that said, we're not going to let a country in the Middle East, which connotes danger, to take over the port in New York. What's going to happen with terrorism and whatnot? With France, it was, I already mentioned that. So there is actually a committee in the United States that reviews the purchases that foreign companies want to make. Now with Starwood, there won't be much trouble. I don't see any national security threat if somebody, if the Marriott is run by a foreigner. But if you think of potash, for example, in Canada, and the Chinese company wanting to buy that company, well, you have a right to ask about national security in terms of food security. Also, a Chinese company is now trying to buy a Swiss seed company. Now, do you want that much central control over seeds? And so that too raises the question of national security. And then there are also health concerns, Ebola, and more lately Zika. Where there's globalization, some diseases follow. And so that might be a reason for it not going ahead. Okay, then going ahead with this field of international PR, and I better watch the time here. Yeah, speed up a little bit because I want to take up a case study. Oh, what do we have to know about the international arena? Now, I've already mentioned you want to know something about the players, the UN, the EU, civil society organizations, and then nation states. Now, nation states deserve the most attention because they're the people we're dealing with most of the time. We being American companies, say, dealing with France or England or Germany and whatnot. So we have to, from a PR viewpoint, say, what do we have to know about nation states? Now, we know how to deal, particularly if you've studied public affairs, we know how to deal with government in the United States. We have to know how laws are passed. We have to know about federal, state, local level. We have to know something about lobbying, about government relations, political action committees. Now, what about nations, states, other nations? We have to learn the same thing. How are laws passed there? Is lobbying any different? For example, lobbying in Norway is very open. It's accepted. You'll find government officials inviting corporate presidents over. And let's talk about this bill, about this issue that we've been promoting. So it's open. Holland, too, they have a society where there are a lot of different civil rights, civil society organizations, and they are expected to bargain, expected to speak out. So those are some of the things you want to know. How much permissiveness is there? Is it open or is it very closed in certain countries? Now, when I say closed in certain countries, another dimension you want to know about foreign countries, what's their economic system? Now, certainly when we think of Russia, we still think of communism and socialism, government ownership of the means of production. That's the official definition of socialism. Now, also when we look at China, there are a lot of SOESs, state-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprises. I forget what the percentage is, but I'm pretty sure it's over 50% are still state-owned enterprises. So we have to know something about their existence. Now then we want to know about the United States and England and a lot of Western countries where we talk about the free market system. That is a standard term for our system. Or also a term like the free enterprise system is used. Now, I look at the political and economic aspect in terms of how welcoming are these different countries to public relations. Is the Soviet Union very welcoming? Would you want to go to Russia and try to work in PR? Is there a lot of room for PR in China? Well, it's growing up because they have more. They've had a little bit more free market system. But in any country that's socialistic entirely, or very close to it, you're not going to find a very hospitable climate for the practice of PR. PR is used, but not corporate PR. PR, they call it PR, the government will use it. They'll use it for propaganda. They'll use it to control people.
Right.
And incidentally, I'm talking about control. A lot of American corporations were also accused of trying to control people. I'm trying to think of that book, The Hidden Persuader. That's the book I'm thinking of. A very popular book in the 1950s. And there the author, Vance Packard, he was saying, this is what PR people do. You know, they're trying to persuade us to think the way corporations think, to accept the American business system. And this was kind of an indictment of PR that were totally owned by corporations. In fact, the titles of other books, like PR, Servants of Power. That's a nice title. The Servants of Power. You know, there's a lot of truth to that. I wouldn't dismiss that entirely. I see too much of it, but there's room, a little bit more flexibility in the American system. So we want to look at the nation states in terms of their economic system, their political system, and then we also have to look at their cultural system. How are the cultures different? Now, I learned the lesson of cultural differences in Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Don't call it a country as I once did. The Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. My family came over and I wanted to take them on a trip to the country. And I was out about 15 miles and hit a little bump in the road, and the tire burst. The side was cut. Gosh, what am I going to do? You know, I can't go back there. So I decided I'm going to invest in a new tire because there was a Sears around there. So I got a new tire, and the trip went along famously. Then I went back to the car rental place, and I walked in there and said, I had a little difficulty with the car. I took it out, and I had a tire that had to be replaced. And I'm asking you for a refund for the tire. It's perfectly reasonable and absolutely calm about it. What grade, if you were somebody in Puerto Rico, somebody in South America, what grade would you give me for my performance in that auto rental place? The answer is D at best. I flunked it. And Annie Bird, one of my former students who lives and works in Puerto Rico, she said, oh, when I told her what I did, you used the entirely wrong approach. You should go in there angrily and say, I am so angry at you people. I was starting out on a vacation, and what happened? One of your tires bursts on me. A bad tire, you should look at it. I had to replace it. And incidentally, there are customers around there, so they're hearing all this. They see me, I should also pound the desk. That might have gotten some response, Annie Bird said. Now, what we're really saying is, some countries are known for being more emotional than others. I was an Anglo-Saxon, a rational approach. You know, and so I didn't get anything out of it. A rational approach, sometimes you have to know when to be emotional about something. So that's one of the differences you learn after a while. Let's see if I have any other examples that I'm trying to remind myself of. I don't think so. Okay, so now with culture, there are whole courses devoted to culture, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail here, except to say that it's probably the most popular subject in the international field. The international culture books were the first ones that were published. They're still being published. They're very popular, and you want to know, if you go to a certain country, how do you behave? And Berlitz will tell you, they'll give you a course. If you're going to Egypt, here's how you behave. If you go to Pakistan, here's how you behave. You know, you don't mix men and women. I made a mistake too in Pakistan. I was there over a Christmas holiday, and while walking, you have to take your shoes off, and then you go in, and all the men are congregated here, all the women are congregated there. And okay, I saw the pattern, and I of course congregated with the men. But in another occasion, a social given by one of the politicians, there were the men, there were the women, and I decided to congregate with the women. And I saw some, well, he's an American, you know, he doesn't know any better. So I was excused. But actually, that was a no-no. That was a no-no. And I was interviewing some of the women, and a lot of the women, incidentally, were from Britain. They married Pakistanis, and they got high status in the countries. They worked, they had wealth in their families and so forth. But anyhow, I asked one of them, what do you do all day anyway? Oh, we do so much housework. You know, just, well, sure you do. I love housework. You know, what they do is they go shopping during the day. But anyhow, you begin, as you travel around, you learn that there are different patterns. You have to obey them in ways. And you can learn, before you go to any country, take a Berlitz course or take a book out of the country. But now, in a classroom, we try to find shortcuts to that. And Hofstede,
yeah,
you know, that's one of the authors. This is somebody who did, I don't know how many tens of thousands of interviews all over the world.
right.
And he tried to say, well, let's boil it down. You know, it's like making cognac out of wine. Let's boil it down. what are the basic dimensions here? And Hofstede did come out with basic dimensions. And among them, individualism and collectivism.
Right.
Well, that's pretty good. You know, we're known as an individualistic society. As we go to Asia, they're more collectivist societies. Now that says a lot as to behavior of people. The Americans are expected to be very selfish, individualistic. We're going to make a profit. And also with workers, we're going to try to help the whole group raise their wages. In the United States, they prefer piecework rather than group salaries. So that explains it. Then you have power distance.
Right.
And with power distance, I think of Japan. There's high power distance there. Now, how does it affect PR? You can't expect a PR person to be in what some people call the dominant coalition, a member of the top management committee. You can't expect that because of the power distance. Same thing, I've seen conflicting results, but Germany is known for high power distance too. Okay, you go on, high context, low context. Germany is a low context country. Now it affects advertising. With advertising, the Germans want to give you the facts. It's also their formality, the engineering aspect. Let's give them the facts. If they have any opinion leader shown in advertising, it's more likely to be an engineer rather than some customer. So you have these pattern variables, and they're a quick way to learn about a country. But you know, the more I think about these variables, they don't say enough to me. If I go to England and I say, well, no, let's take Italy. And I learned that they're a little bit more family-oriented, collectivist-oriented. Okay, what am I going to do with that information? See, the test that I want to put all this knowledge to is, how does this help me perform better? How does it help me decide how to practice PR in a particular country? Now, go to Japan, feminism, masculinity. One of my former students, Jane Hiscock, she went to Japan with her company, I forget what it was, and the guy who was going to give, who was going to head the press conference wasn't there, and she had to do it. She realized that there was hostility toward her, because in Japan, because at that time, this was about 10 years ago, a woman doesn't run a press conference. You know, it's just not done. This is a masculine thing that's done. And so that's an idea that this suggests how you use these pattern variables, if you happen to know that that's the way the Japanese behave. Okay, others, uncertainty, avoidance, I put here. And when we take up the case later on, ask yourself whether VW, Volkswagen, whether they were engaged in this particular behavior, uncertainty, avoidance. Okay, then going on with the book, and very, very quickly, a lot is said about the nation brand. Now here's where I'm a great believer in using the concepts from PR and applying it nationally, applying it internationally. And not only in PR, but in marketing. Now the marketing people have just invented the term brand, and they talk about the product brand. Then we in PR talked about a country's reputation. The advertising people marketing people reminded, you should call that country brand. You know, they like the word brand. So it's product brand, company brand, and now nation brand. Nations also have a reputation. And when there was an upsurge of anti-Americanism about 10 years ago, well, when we went to war in Iraq, American companies found out what it meant to have a negative national brand because they lost business. So here you have these three levels. And incidentally, I also like, whenever possible, to refer to the basic social science behind these professional terms that are used. And certainly, Edward L. Bernays, he said that PR is largely a social science. Of course, the way he used social science was to go to his psychology friends or psychoanalysts and get ideas for publicity. So, for example, getting women to smoke in public, he went to psychoanalysts and asked them, give me the meaning of smoking a cigarette. Well, it's an oral thing, and oral satisfaction that a woman gets when she puts a cigarette in her mouth. And so off he went, and Fifth Avenue, he had a whole campaign there to get, I think it was 20 women who were well known in society to smoke in public. And to smoke in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral on Easter Day. Because now you're changing values. You know, on Easter Day, when you think of values associated with religion, they are now smoking. Oh, wow, how defiant can you be? So anyhow, he used social science in that way. Now, going back to the brand idea, well, I think Harold Burson said it, it's really based on perception, the psychology of perception. And it may help to sort of look at a book on what do these psychologists say about perception, how perception is formed, how can you influence perceptions, and then along with perceptions, also attitudes. First book well, not the first, second book I wrote was called Designs for Persuasive Communication. And there I explored the whole idea of perceptions and attitudes. And it helped me in my PR classes. I can't remember right now how, but anyhow, you know, certainly here I'm applying it internationally when I talk about brands in three different levels. So I'm taking a approach of three levels and also looking at the foundation of social science. Then I think you understand what nation brand means and how it might be damaged and how it might be restored. And of course, in this chapter on nation brand, I talk about the assaults on corporations, how the NGOs or nonprofit organizations, how they attack corporations so that their reputations are sullied. Okay, so that's the nation brand. Now then, what you also want to do in an international book is what are some of the key issues. And I said earlier that the title, I may use the title management, or issues in management, or management issues. Well, I think PR makes a great contribution through issues management. We could also look at certain issues, and the ones that I selected for treatment in the book, I want to be very, very short in this. I thought sustainability. It's an issue that has incorporated environmental issues, and it's much broader. It also, what sustainability does, it says, you know, PR people and marketing people, corporations in general, they've got to go beyond just going to the marketplace and buying something. For example, cocoa. cocoa beans are in short supply this year. The price is supposed to go up. Buy all the chocolate now. Go to the market. So anyhow, what does a company do that is dependent on cocoa? It goes to its farmers, and the farmers say, sorry, we just don't have enough cocoa beans around. Now what would you then do? You know, doesn't this suggest something that maybe you've been too short-sighted? You think you could just go to the cocoa farmers and buy cocoa? So here we had a new meaning given to a neglected stakeholder group, suppliers. Supplier relations. They established relationships, there's another good PR word, with these farmers, and they learned that these farmers did not really know how to grow the cocoa beans properly. They didn't use fertilizer. So I forget which company it was, whether it was Nestle's or some other company. They started hiring agricultural people to work with the farmers to show them how to cultivate these beans properly. As a result, many more were grown. Many more were grown. And the farmers are better off. They're getting, they're selling more. They're getting, their income is going up. So the whole idea is follow the supply track. What this also says is, with sustainability, as the world gets overpopulated, and as we're using up more and more resources, we've got to ask ourselves whether our natural resources will be abundant enough. And so I would say to PR people, pay more attention to supplier relations and find out ways in which you can improve the abundance of natural resources. So I'm drawing attention to natural resources to a great, great extent. It's been a neglected subject, and as we run across an obstacle and find out our suppliers are no longer able to do this, we've got to play a role in this. So that's part of sustainability. Then climate change, that's part of the, I say this is the ultimate sustainability problem. And there are questions, issues. I remember being hated by practically everybody in the room of the Petroleum Institute of America when I suggested a carbon tax.
Oh gosh, you were not welcome.
Well, I was an economist, and I said, the best way to solve this is through a carbon tax. Oh God, who let this guy in? Now it's acceptable. In fact, if I read right, I think Exxon is even recommending a carbon tax. But anyhow, that was 20 years ago when I said that. Now it's acceptable. So we have to arrive at a decision in a corporation. Do we support the idea of a carbon tax, or do we oppose it? You know, here public affairs is involved. And then, of course, you know, we have these conferences, and this Paris conference was acclaimed as a great, great success. Baloney, I say, because it was a success because all they had to do was make promises. They didn't have to make commitments. They were not tied down to any specific goals within a given time. So anyhow, they all applaud themselves. We did great in Paris, and I don't see it that way. I believe people have to suffer first before they're going to believe in climate change. They have to be told that you have to put sunscreen on when you go out all the time. We're told that now, but we're told that more and more. Unless people suffer, they're just not going to do it. Because people, and here we deal with the time dimension, people on the whole take a short-term time perspective, not a long-term. And climate change, that requires a long-term one. And incidentally, there's a book, I forget its title, but it talks about the meaning of time. You know, we're talking about, when we talk about climate change, has industrialization added to the warming of the Earth? Has industry made a contribution? Well, we're just looking at a couple of 100 years. Now, then you look at, you go to the Museum of Natural History and find, hey, we go back hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years before we became Homo sapiens. And now we're saying within these 2 centuries, are we able to make a commitment maybe to keep from burning up? So anyhow, I'm very pessimistic about climate change. People have to suffer a little bit more first. Industry has to suffer, and then, okay, under pressure, you change. Now, here, okay, I'm going to stop shortly and start with the case. Okay, another big area I look at is technology and innovation. And here I just want to say that we too often restrict our definition of technology as new products, new processes. We don't include new ways of doing things. And when you think of Uber and its great success, what did they learn to do? It's a new way of managing rides and combining the technology of a smartphone with global satellite positioning. You put those 2 together, and you start what is now the richest company in the world. You know, so you have to consider that with technology. But this is a case I've written up, but I'm not taking up this case. Uber is facing a lot of resistance. Right. Obviously, the cab drivers. You know, protests in London and in Paris. French government particularly fines. They fine certain Uber operations. Also, there are issues. Is an Uber driver really an independent contractor? Or are they really employees? And should they have the same rights as employees? So, you know, there are all kinds of issues that PR and public affairs will have to sort out and argue over. So, and then also in this particular chapter dealing with technology, I think in PR we neglected certain communication settings. And what I refer to here is, you know, there's a healthcare setting. That's pretty well known because a lot of our students have gone into healthcare. And you talk to people there, they have to know more about science and the way doctors think and talk. And then there's also a science setting. And I ran across that at Brookhaven National Lab. They have a wonderful group of people there. And they're in the world of science. And of course, science is international. It's universal. So some PR people are going to work in these scientific settings when you have to learn more about science. You have to learn more about the mentality of scientists and engineers. Now, I learned about the mentality of engineers and scientists when I taught a course at MIT as a graduate, as a teaching assistant. And the book we were using referred to the logic of sentiments. Well, now, the class, there's always hostility between undergraduates at MIT and a teaching assistant. You know, that's not a professor, just a teaching assistant. We could attack him. And so this guy thought he was ready to attack me. What do you mean? There's no logic to sentiments. I just looked at that student and said, no logic in sentiments? Do you look at public opinion polls? Is there any logic to the way the poll is taken and the way the statistics are gathered? So, yeah, there's logic in it. So we have to drop that criticism. And then also, I don't know how many of you know scientists and engineers. I lived with them for 2.5 years at the MIT Graduate House. I was living with a low-temperature physicist. You know, just imagine, low temperature. His personality was low temperature. There's no talking about emotions versus rationality. It was all rationality. Oh, you know. So I know how to deal with these people. They're not too they operate in a narrow range, the scientific range. Some of them are perfectly good people. Some of them are my best friends. Okay, so now I go over to the management aspect, and I think we'll take the case, we'll hand it out. Here they are. Okay, there they go. Okay, you take a puzzle and I'll take a puzzle. You've heard of VW, Volkswagen? This is a case that I welcome so highly because actually reference was made to poor corporate governance of VW. But read the case, and I'll read it over again to you. And with the California Air Resources Board, and with all of you, and in my German words, we have totally screwed up. Wow, what an admission to make. We have totally screwed up. We have been dishonest. We've been lying. And then what's supposed to happen? What does VW do? I think the question I asked over here is, how would you classify this wrongdoing? Maybe there's some names, if you use them, that would help you arrive at some kind of decision. But anyhow, what do you do if you are, and this is a big if you were a public relations manager, a corporate communications officer at VW, which incidentally they did not have. Or they had one, but he didn't perform those services. He was strictly a publicity man, and was sort of a friend of the CEO, what's his name, Black? Whatever his name is. So here's a major admission made. We've lied to you. I mean, I'm trying to think of other cases where an executive has come out and said, we're dishonest. Or dishonest, yeah, but we've lied to you. This is unheralded. I'm not sure they recognize what a big event this was. And then there seemed to be a question of, how long have you known this? And at first, not too much is said about it, but then it turns out that, there were people who knew about it. Instead of, the closest we have to an issues manager is this quality manager who goes around and checks out the quality of the cars. He's very much relating to products. He does not perform the regular function of informing management of a rising issue. When I talked with General Motors people in Sydney, Australia, one of the jobs that they had was anything that appeared in the newspaper, or anything that they heard pertaining to General Motors, they immediately, they didn't email in those days, they immediately telephoned and said, this was in today's paper. In other words, they alerted top management to what was going on. There's no evidence here that top management was even alerted. Here's this American management telling American dealers that, hey, we have lied. We have lied to you. Now, does it help you to classify this? Is there any way you think about this? How do you handle this? How do you find the next step here? I've lied to you. And now as a PR person, what are you going to do? Assuming there was a PR person around. And apparently there wasn't anybody who really picked up on this. So the American public has been lied to. how serious is this? Is it a serious admission? Is it a serious deed to lie this way about these devices that we put in the software cars, so that the real emissions were not recorded? And this software was smart enough to know that, hey, I'm being tested. I'm going to have low emissions now. 1 hour on the road, okay, I can, you know, pull out all the smoke I want. So, how do you handle this? How do you think about this? Is there any label? Is there any category we use for how, I call it an event. Is there any category that is a little bit more specific?
I don't know how many of them might have taken the crisis. Has anybody taken the crisis communication course yet?
I don't know.
Do you remember from the crisis?
No, it just started.
Oh, it just started.
Just started.
Okay.
Crisis of deception.
Well, now that you mentioned the word crisis, should this be categorized as a crisis?
It is.
Definitely.
It is.
Very definitely. You know, not just an event.
Right.
Journalists take care of events. PR people take care of crises.
Right.
So, okay, this is a crisis.
Crisis of deception.
Crisis of deception?
Oh, there, now we're getting very technical. Yeah. I won't ask you what are the other kinds of crises that there are, but certainly in the Crisis Manager, the first edition that came out, I simply talked about crisis of management failure.
Right.
It was a very broad term. And then the next book, there were so many management failures. I said, I can't deal with all these. I've got to have subcategories.
Right.
And so one of the subcategories was deception.
Right.
Are there other subcategories that you can think of? Make them up. You don't have to refer to the categories I use, but you know, okay, there was deception. They lied.
Yeah.
They lied. Now, will any other category, subcategory, help you to think this through? Maybe, let me approach it in this way. So here was this deception. It was announced. What's the impact of this announcement? What should VW expect? What should it expect? Who's going to shake a fist?
Customers.
I mean,
Their customers?
yes, yes. And by referring to consumers, you're also referring to one of the subcategories that I call skewed values.
Right.
Now, the typical skewed value is that management is so focused on making money, and in this case, so focused on making money by being the number one, they wanted the prestige, the number one automobile seller in the world. I think Toyota had that, and they wanted it. And when you reach for number one, you're very often going to get into trouble. And they got into trouble. So anyhow, skewed values, customers suffered. What else was damaged, or what else could you say was damaged or hurt by this deception?
Reputation.
Pardon me?
Their reputation.
Certainly their reputation, very much so. And they have to realize this. Here we build up, you know, we want this reputation of being number one. Meanwhile, we're seen as liars. I mean, just imagine if you were called a liar. I mean, I would feel terribly damaged. You liar, you. That's damaging. And so here they had, I think VW had a wonderful reputation. Certainly, going back to Nation Brand, they shared the country's reputation for engineering skills, scientific approach to everything. And so their reputation was now damaged. Now, I don't know so much about their engineering reputation, because here they used some very clever engineering in developing this software. So, you know, we have to be careful. Their reputation was damaged, but we've got to look at it more specifically and say, well, this doesn't mean our engineering reputation has suffered. We've misused it, but it hasn't suffered. Okay, so what else? What else has been hurt?
Trust.
Trust. Certainly, again, just as with reputation,
Right.
we're saying the trust in VW. And after all, when you buy a vehicle, you know, a certain product that is dangerous to operate, you need trust.
Mm-hmm.
Now, trust in the vehicle itself, the efficiency of it, and the safety of it, and then trust that the company is going to back you up. You know, so trust is very important, and of course, you lie to something like that. Trust was damaged. Can you trust a VW person who makes a statement when you're not sure that he's telling the truth or lying to you? Okay, what else? Skewed values.
Mm-hmm.
What else has been damaged? Because, yes,
I was gonna say, it kind of shows that Volkswagen shows like poor ethics, because they knew they were lying, and about the emissions, so
yeah,
it's kind of an ethical issue too.
a kind of
An ethical issue.
It's certainly, yes.
Yeah.
I would say the overall problem is it's an ethical issue. Yeah. And ethics, you wonder, what are the ethics of VW people, the managers? You really wonder about that. Can I trust them, you know, going back to that particular word? Can I trust them at all? Now, again, we're looking for, some writers on crises talk about victims. A new kind of public is started. They're called victims. But now this isn't so much a person that's a victim. Something else has suffered, has been victimized. Now I'm going to give you a name of another company, and then I'm sure you're going to think of it. VW. VW and the explosion of the rig.
The environment. Bingo.
Exactly.
I win.
Exactly.
Gold star
Boy,
right
that
here.
truth was hard to extract. The environment. My God,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
here for decades we've been
Years.
Right.
talking about the
Yeah.
environment and
Yeah.
safeguarding the environment, improving the environment. And VW, they're paying billions of dollars because they damaged the environment.
The
So
PP?
Pardon me?
BP?
BP.
Yeah.
Yeah, BP. So that, you know, that's important. We're so used to thinking about people, we sometimes ignore the environment, ignore just our things around us. So the environment, now specifically, I think I mentioned, nitrogen oxide gas. That's a very dangerous pollutant, more than carbon monoxide. And so they were spewing that out, and really, I don't have the statistics here, but it's several-fold more dangerous than the usual greenhouse emissions we talk about. So, okay, so the environment is harmed, customers are harmed. Now, how are customers harmed? How would you categorize? They've been lied to, but financially, do they suffer? Do they suffer in any other way? You know, you really have to go behind this word consumer. I'm a consumer, and I'm thinking of my wife's cousin in Canada who bought a diesel. And he bought it. Why? Well, one thing, good efficiency. Got a lot of mileage per buck because it was using diesel. The other thing, he is an environmentalist. So he was worried about it. He bought the car because he said, not only am I getting good mileage for a buck, but also I'm not harming the environment so much. So now his sensitivities are affected. Not only the environment objectively, but also his wanting to cooperate with the environmental movement. That was damaged. Now, how can you correct that? And this is the next question. You know, when, oh, incidentally, the third category of management failure is plain old misconduct.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was let me get his name straight here, the president, the then president of the company, corn or something.
Wintercorn.
What?
Wintercorn?
Wintercorn. Wintercorn, that's right. Now that we're in spring, we got wintercorn. So wintercorn, he said, he categorized this misdeed as one of misconduct. He himself said that. Now, what do we know from crisis management about the consequences to a CEO who's accused of misconduct? One of the regular events is the CEO resigns. He's fired. You know, you can look at the case after case. If there's serious misconduct, which is attributed to the top, then you have to leave the job. And indeed, Winterkorn did resign. Now then, the big, going back to the word deception, who knew about this? You know, it's rather, I don't know if this is in here. Yeah, okay. Well, Horn admitted, this is dishonest and you screwed up. Okay, what I want to refer to where is this? Oh, I have a whole. Maybe it's at the end here.
I just want to tell, for those of the students in this class, if you're,
Somehow I lost
well, maybe while you're looking
my
at
whole copy where I have a lot of good quotes. Oh, here it is. I've been walking around too much. Okay, what is amazing, let's see, what are some other questions I asked here in your. Okay, let's see. I'll look at your copy here. How would you classify this wrongdoing? Does CSR apply? Sure, ethics, you know, that's biggest one. Now, number two, how could this have happened at the world famous VW? What was wrong in its structure, culture, or corporate communications? You know, how do you explain this? I mean, we know, and even VW admitted it because they provided a chronology of it. They knew about this. They, you have to be careful, they is, in California, VW knew that the EPA was looking into this. They knew practically a year ahead of time that West Virginia University did some studies, and they knew about it, and they were reporting it to the environmental authorities in California. Well, this was happening before Horn gave this speech and said, we screwed up, we lied. All this was going on. Now what's wrong here? How could this happen in such a big company that a major deception was taking place? And Winterkorn says he knew nothing of it. Nobody knew anything about it. What does this tell you about the character, the nature of VW? You know, and in this question here, just broadly ask here, okay, what could have happened? What was wrong in its structure, culture, and corporate communications? So let's just take any one of those. It's communications. We'll work backwards. What's wrong?
There's no good organizational communication. There's maybe no feedback to the leaders.
Your sign language is very good. Feedback. Yeah, that's it. Feedback. We're very good. I have to remember that. Where's the feedback? You know, now did Winterkorn, was he notified before this Horn guy blew the lid off the deception. You see?
Isn't that related to the culture of the company?
Yes.
That their poor communication, poor management team, it all adds up together, so that's the result.
Yeah, I think certainly we could say that. There's been poor communications, and to be even more specific, I referred to issues management earlier, and I referred to the General Motors guy in Australia. There's nobody out there who's reporting back, before this announcement was made by Horn, who says, hey, the EPA is wise to us. Nobody's picking up the information. Now, I doubt that. I think the information was picked up, but nobody is communicating it.
That's
to whom?
organizational communication. There's 4 students here in Org Quorum.
Okay.
You all see that, I hope?
Yeah. I mean, they're not communicating. Also, sometimes we characterize an organization in terms of, is it an open organization or is it a secretive organization? Wow, secretive, the nth degree here. And then, did anybody, whoever writes they did have a communications person. Winterkorn was buddies with somebody who was called a PR person or corporate communicator. In fact, they received a joint award at the equivalent of PRSA, Public Relations Society of America, 2 years previous. They were buddies. They were buddies. So, if you talk about, hey, didn't the communications person have access to the CEO? Well, they were buddies. But what did they talk about?
Not corporate communication.
Not corporate communication.
And not crisis communication.
No,
and not organizational communication.
There seems to be no idea of what do you communicate up there. Now, going back to the title of the proposed book here, Management Issues. This is an issue.
Right.
A crisis issue.
Right.
Don't you communicate? Don't you have a sense of urgency?
Mm-hmm.
Dummy, don't you realize?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and you wonder what kind of leadership style he had. Was his leadership style top-down? Was it classical scientific manager if people were afraid to go back up? I don't know.
Well, you wonder how many people had access. In fact, since this crisis has occurred, there have been some changes at VW, but they're focusing on structure. One change in structure is that the CEO will no longer have as many people reporting to him as before. Now he'll only have 17. Now, I don't know what you know about the span of control, how many people report to a person. Now with a diversified company like that, all these different brands, 17 people, and you think you've simplified your structure? Come on. That's too broad a span of control. But structure is not everything. They have moved brands around, and brand managers are now something else. Now that appearance of doing something, on the one hand, is important. You report it, we are taking this seriously, we are making changes. But when you look at the changes, and I think about PR, the field that we're in here, I don't see any evidence. I don't see any evidence. In fact, the closest I got to finding any evidence was that there is a corporate communications officer. The job was created because there were so many media inquiries that they needed a media relations office.
Right.
So again, we're back to media relations. What about issues management? What about communicating important facts to the top? And then there's, I know nothing, I have been told nothing, we on the top are absolutely innocent. Some small group of engineers out there, they did this. And then just to play the game, and I call it a game, I don't know who they're trying to fool. They certainly didn't fool certain writers in business publications. A quality manager wrote a memo to all employees and say, you know, it's okay to whistleblow. We have to get to the bottom of this and find out who's really responsible for this. And we don't know, so won't you police tell us? And mind, we won't fire you unless you've been recently employed and whatnot, you know, a few conditions there. But anyhow, imagine going to your own employee, playing a game, I call it pretense, playing the game that we knew nothing, because we actually have to go to our own employees and ask them if they know. I mean, who do they think we are? We, the public. They're just making fools of them. They think we're fools, and we can't understand that. It's just incredible to me that they play this game that nobody in the top knew. Now, of course, it tells us we have a closely knit management there. They protect one another. They need PR. They need an issues manager. They need somebody who will make them aware of what's going on, the gravity of the situation. You know, here, if a PR type could say, now, other companies have faced these kinds of crises, and here's what's happened to them. They're still closing their eyes to it. Now, have they made any adjustments? For example, skewed values. We say customers have been hurt. Now, one of the remedies is you try to make good with the people who have been harmed, and customers have been harmed. Now, have they made any proposal there? They should. You know, they've got to make good with customers. The closest they came to was they announced it, and then there was an ad in the papers saying, we're going to give you $500 cash, $500 for fuel, and $500 for road service. In other words, we're going to pay you off. We know you've suffered economically, so we're going to pay you off. Well, now, one of the journalists said this was insultingly inadequate. Insultingly inadequate. If you've lost, if the resale value of your diesel has gone down by, say, $3,000, $4,000, you're just $1,500 isn't going to do it. So it's the amount that you're partially talking about. Now, it would make sense to say you have suffered economically, so let's take care of that. And I don't know to what extent they know anything about public opinion surveys or talking with their own customers. You know, try to, I would say, talk to your customers. What would make sense? What would make you feel satisfied in terms of the financial burden you've been suffering? And so, I see it's almost 8 o'clock, or it is 8 o'clock. You have to take care of that. Now, in terms of the environment, harm has been done. And I go back to BW, and they have paid billions to make up for the damage that was done. Now, it's a little harder to say, you know, damage in the atmosphere rather than say there's damage in beaches and whatnot. But still, they're going to be sued for billions of dollars to make good for the harm done to the environment. Now, but mainly, and this is what I want to conclude with, I just felt that looking at this, they don't know anything about what PR people do. And the value of having a PR person up in the top management committee, the dominant coalition, as some people call it. They don't seem to realize that. Now, you need that kind of a person. I see no evidence in anything I've read in the newspapers that they have identified such a person, or they've given a label, chief communications officer, but not the functions that this person performs. Incidentally, and I might end with this, the management function here is one that I believe in very, very strongly. And this chart, which was made for public affairs, represents the way sociologists and occupational people look at the variety of jobs. And I like this when I first came across it. I simply put put this together. There are three levels, three major occupational groups. One is the technical level, and you talk about technical technicians and PR. Professional, that's the middle, that's what we mostly identify with. And then there's executive public relations. Just put down public relations instead of affairs. So those are the three levels. Professional, looking up, I say we are counselors in management. And if we're counselors, we ought to be on a management committee. And if it's not a full-fledged committee, at least there ought to be some kind of a subcommittee that reports on a regular basis to top management. It has to be some contact. Hey, there's something going on in California. We want to know about it. We want to get ready for it. This is going to be a major crisis. And then a technical, well, we are managers of public relations. And I have over here on the left-hand side, that's mainly issues management in many ways. We monitor the socio-political environment. We analyze public opinion and trends and issues, and then we contribute to strategic planning and policy making. Mm-hmm. So PR people here would say, hey, here are new policies that we need to have to safeguard the interests of the environment and of the consumers. And then going down, this is the communications function, formulating public policy and public affairs goals and strategies. So we're developing strategies. And then on the professional level, planning public relations campaigns and programs, and then executing plans, engaging in communications. So I find this a way of justifying calling a book a management, including management in the title. I think you need management, and I think the VW case proves this to us. You've got to have some involvement. If you're only communicating, and you're waiting for top management to tell you, now you should communicate, you're not doing your job. So at least that aspect of management has to be recognized by us. We have to play a role in providing them with information about what's going on out there. After all, we're supposed to be boundary spanners. That's a term we often use. Mm-hmm. So let's use that function. And then also make suggestions as to what some of the policies might be. For example, how to help consumers overcome their loss. So that's rounding it out and saying I really feel that management has to be included in any treatment of international PR or international corporate communications. Okay, that's it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's been fun.
Thank you.